Now, I'm very pleased to say we've got a special guest, Gbgb Managing Director Mark Bird is with us this evening. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Jason. How are you?
Very well indeed. And the industry's very well, or certainly a little bit better off. Certainly very exciting news indeed. And I do realise that not everybody may not know the exciting news. So what I will do is just read the first couple of paragraphs from today's Racing Post. Headline, industry set for £3 million boost as anticipated fund deal is agreed. An historic agreement for major online bookmakers to make voluntary contributions to the British Greyhound Racing Fund on internet turnover is set to net the sport up to £3 million per year. Mims Davis, MP, the Minister for Sport, has announced that the funding would contribute towards new tailored training for veterinary staff, the expansion of an injury recovery scheme to ensure more greyhounds can enjoy a full and active life following racing, and the provision of more homes for dogs as they enter retirement through increased funding from the Greyhound Trust. The extra money will also go towards improving safety across the nation's 21 licensed racetracks, kennel improvements and the provision of air conditioning for trainers' vehicles to improve welfare standards. The voluntary commitment from Betfred, William Hill, Sky Betting and Gaming and Paddy Power Betfair was reached following discussions chaired by the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, which called for a fair return to the greyhound industry from the bookmakers' profits on the sport. This follows major operators Ladbrokes Coral, Bet365 and JenningsBet, who had previously made commitments on the same basis. All excellent stuff, and it does seem that the government, Mark, is empathetic towards greyhound racing, particularly from the welfare point of view. Now, traditionally, bookmakers have been a bit of a cash cow for the government, but this decision, which they've been vehemently behind, and other decisions recently, is there a sea change?
I think there is. I think the government have started to wake up to the fact that obviously animal welfare, but in particular with what we're talking about, greyhound welfare, is of paramount importance. We spoke before we even came on air about the fact that promotion within the greyhound sport needs to be better advertised. But as I said before, it's inextricably linked to the fact that if we don't get welfare right, then we don't get promotion right. And the reality of all of this is that what we've been saying for a long time to bookmakers is that they need to put their money in their pocket. They need to take their money out of their pockets, pay for welfare, because until they do that, they're not going to get a sport that's going to be backed by the general public and certainly by government.
And going to where that money might be going, we heard that quote from Mims Davis, and it basically aligns, doesn't it, with your own greyhound commitment. Things such as the BSI kennel standards as well, I know, is paramount amongst your thoughts. Yeah,
if you look at where the money's going to go in the short term, certainly over the next 2 or 3 years, it is going to be things like we've made an undertaking to the government that we would invest in trainers' kennels. We need to get to a standard. Well, that standard's been written for the last year. The reason we haven't been able to move that on is because actually there's been such underfunding around things like trainers' kennels that it's a big ask to do that. So we need the funding to do it. So the standards on kennels are going to be one of the big things over the next year. You mentioned about the injury recovery scheme. That only started back in October. Already we've had 30 dogs that have had finances by way of grant come from the Greyhound Board to assist owners to get their dogs repaired. Because part of the commitment is about, trainers and owners stopping putting their dogs to sleep purely on the basis that it's an economic repair.
So does this, if you like, government support come with caveats?
Well, certainly on the kennels it does, because obviously that came out from when we were reviewed back in 2015, where they said that there needed to be an improvement in the overall standard of residential greyhound kennels. So I think if we were to accept this money and then not do anything with it, in terms of doing those kennels, then I think we'd be called back in before government again. So there are some strings attached to it, but what we have done by completing the commitment back in March of last year, we've set out our 5-year plan as to how we want to spend this money. So it's there for everyone to see, and the government are actually being led on what the spending is going to be by us. So that's quite clear.
And it must be said that this £3 million is a proposed figure. Isn't it? Can you tell us how that was arrived at?
So for those who don't know, horse racing is for the BHA, the British Horse Racing Association, they get their money on forecast. So bookmakers will assume that what they're going to make in a particular year, and they'll pay on that. At the end of the year, they have to reconcile it or give more money back to the BHA. That's never worked for greyhound racing. Of course, the other thing which I should mention is that horse racing is obviously on a statutory levy. We are not. That's not to say I don't want to see one, but we are not on a statutory levy. So with us, it's on the money is actually paid on actuals. So we won't see any of this, and I keep saying to DCMS and everybody else, it's up to, we think, an estimate of about £3 million. So it could fall short of that. It's unlikely to be above it. So we'll start getting actual funds coming in probably from March onwards.
I mean, you've just half answered what I'm next going to ask you. Ministers change, governments indeed change, might change quite soon actually, and certainly businesses' perspectives and sometimes allegiances change. Now this is voluntary, so in theory they could pull out as soon as they've put in, as in tomorrow. Now what can you do, or are you now going to push, victorious as we are feeling at the moment, to make this a mandatory payment?
Okay, so you've already said right when we started this that there's been a sea change in government. Now, one of the things that has been a real positive by doing this negotiation, and for the fact that it's gone on for so long, is that the Greyhound Board and some of our stakeholders and some of the charities, animal welfare charities that are out there as well, have actually started to galvanise together. So we've got MP support, I would suggest, not only from within government, but from outside of government as well. So I think, you know, if the Tory government goes and we get another government coming in, I think we'll still have a level of support that's there because it's cross-party. You know, the animal welfare is a big issue for many MPs.
Was it a source of frustration for you that it did take so long, and some of the firms, welcome as they are, that they are paying, and we should, you know, accentuate the positive, that is fantastic, but they're only starting to pay from this year. Yeah. Not in the case of Bet365, who always paid, Ladbrokes Coral, or indeed Jennings Bet, who paid yes. From the start of this year, or last year I should say now, 2018. And also the fact that retail, income from retail sides, shops are closing down. They've got the FOBTs that you've already mentioned as well. Yep. So will there in some ways just be a scaling effect with this new money? Okay,
so first of all, we're going to have to be cautious with the money anyway. So we're not going to go and start blowing it on different things other than what we've got as priorities. Because you're absolutely right, Jason. The money which we've previously had in has always been on retail. There's been lots of debates, and obviously as of April this year, the fixed odd betting terminals, the stake money will go down. Now the bookmakers actually threatened to close shops if that was going to be the case. So what we have seen over the last year is probably something like a 20% drop off in revenue coming in from retail. So it's less money than we had last year, and what the online represents is probably more money. So it's still a good news story. Let's not lose sight of that. It's just a question that we as the regulating board and we as the board that has said that we're going to take this forward with a commitment have to be quite cautious about how we're spending that money, because we won't know until the end of this year about what the FOBT effect is going to have on retail.
Now, since you've come into your stewardship, if I may call it that, and I don't want to compare you to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in the 80s, but there has been, if you like, glasnost and perestroika. There's certainly been a restructure, and glasnost part of it, openness as well. With the additional money, you've already, I think, alluded to the fact that people will actually be able to see directly where that money is going. That's true, yeah? Yeah,
I mean, one of the things where we had the negotiation with the bookmakers and there was this real impasse was because, you know, we were telling them basically we're going to spend the money on integrity and on welfare and on prize money. But actually what we hadn't done, which is something that I've taken on since I've taken over, is basically do line by line budgeting accounts for the bookmakers so they can see exactly where that money's going. I think that was one of the big hurdles that we had to get over within the industry.
And is there any way that the bookmakers could be ingratiated even more? I mean, now some have, as we've already mentioned, already been paying. For those that are paying, the money's going to good causes. This is something that they should want to be associated with. Just the top of my head, you know, some rehoming kennels open, call them the Bet365 homing kennels, and who knows, they might even give a bit more. Yeah,
I think, again, it's been a huge frustration of mine is trying to say to the bookmakers when we're trying to strike this deal, that if you can deal with welfare and make that effectively go away because you're funding it, then everything else will follow. So it's been a long path to do that, but I think they are actually starting to wake up to the fact that there is more in it for them if they want to do it.
Yeah, which is obviously why they've come around, you know, and with, as you say, the changing high street and the changing situation, greyhound racing has always been there and is more than just dependable. It's a fruitful source of income for them. Greyhound racing to wider welfare, obviously key, and we've spoken about that. Promotion.
Yeah, as I said, the two are inextricably linked, but there is this part about, since the Greyhound Board's been in existence, about what part it plays in the promotion of the sport as well. So we're very keen to deal with the perceptional issues that are there, which again are mainly built up on misconceptions around welfare. But once we've done that, I mean, we had 2 board directors yesterday talking to potential commercial candidates that could come within the Greyhound board as well. So we really do want to start pumping the promotion of the sport as well.
I mean, apart from anything else, because the sport's great, we agree that. I know we're biased, but the sport's wonderful. But sometimes it does seem a little bit antiquated. It's not as slick as it could be. Well, one issue, for instance, non-runners. When a track knows that a greyhound isn't running, it seems to take an age for that information to filter through to everybody. I mean, is that something that's in your remit, something that you could look at?
Well, we can look at that as part of the regulation of the sport. I mean, I don't necessarily see that as something that necessarily impacts on the promotion of it in any great deal, but it's something we can certainly look at from a regulatory point of view.
Yeah, I think it's more to do so with. I don't think sometimes greyhound racing has trouble getting people to go along every now and then to enjoy it once, but for them people take it that next step further.
Absolutely.
You know, there are lots of options out there. So something that happens that somebody think, oh crikey, that doesn't happen in horse racing or wherever else it may be, that might be off-putting for them.
Well, one of the things we've looked at prior to getting the funding agreed was the fact that we also need to start looking at a new demography as well. There are fewer people watching greyhound racing at the tracks. There are fewer people watching greyhound racing, dare I say, on TV necessarily. But actually, most young people these days will be looking at their smartphones or their iPads, etc. And so again, we need to look at whether or not we need to move into those sort of markets as well. But we can only do that with other industry partners as well.
I know that you did write, I think it was back in June, to, I hope I get the names right, Paul Darling of the ABB and Clive Hawkswood of the RGA. Betting organisations, for those that don't know.
The open letter.
The open letter was a positive response there?
Well, we've got the money. So I'm going to say yes, it was positive.
It was
eventually.
Positive. Well, I think it is very, very positive news overall. We really haven't got long. We do thank you for coming in. Going forward, if there's one message to take from this, what would that be?
We've struck the deal. It's been a long time coming. I'd like to say that at the end of it, we are, dare I say, still friends with the bookmakers. So there is more we can do around this. My ambition over the next few years is to get sustained increased funding for the sport. £3 million is great. It's a sticking plaster. It doesn't solve the problems. So for me, it's about getting sustained long-term funding for this sport because that's what it deserves.
Lovely, Mark. Thank you very, very much. And it is great news for greyhound racing, £3 million. And speaking to Mark, and I'm sure that everyone who's watched this will agree, it's in good hands. We'll be back with our racing this evening after the break.